Hello everyone, let's review the results of November's 3-card blind main event tournament. This month we had 253 participants, and among those 253 participants there were 38 brand new players to the main event. So if you're a new player who participated this month, thank you for trying the format and I hope to see you again next month. This month there were 169 unique decks submitted to the main event. And as a percentage of the total number of submissions, this was a very similar proportion of unique decks to what we saw in the month prior. However, we use a more sophisticated system to measure meta health. If we weighed every card based off of its performance and ran it through the Simpsons Diversity Index, we would see that this month was an improvement over the last month in terms of overall diversity. The 3-card blind diversity grade for this month was a B+. This month there was a tie for the two most popular cards, and those cards were Hexdrinker and Remote Farm. Last month, part of the reason that Hexdrinker was such a strong performer was that it was uniquely able to leverage Wasteland beyond what a lot of other decks were able to do. In matches where the opponent didn't have a non-basic land that was worth destroying, Wasteland could be used as an additional mana source to level up Hexdrinker faster. This month, in the absence of Wasteland, Hexdrinker has continued to be a strong performer, indicating that the strength of the card goes far beyond just its ability to leverage Wasteland. There is no question that it's one of the strongest 1-drops in the format right now, and it certainly was the most popular. The prevalence of Remote Farm can be explained by the abundance of powerful white 2-drops that can be used in various different combinations with each other. If you've been following the tournament for the past few months, the cards Ajani, Prairie Dog, and Skrelv's Hive are all very familiar faces at this point. The one oddball out that is evidently missing from this list is Felia Exuberant Shepherd. I don't have a clear answer for you as to why Felia has become less popular, but this month at least players tended to gravitate towards different options. Beyond these couple of high-level observations, I don't have any trends to share with you. This month the meta felt fragmented, and there weren't that many trends that could be observed across different pods. Part of this is due to the meta's diversity itself, but I think another factor here is that the transition from the month prior where Wasteland was legal to this month where Wasteland is not legal was a massive and jarring change for a lot of players, making this meta comparatively less explored than a lot of the prior months. I suspect as the community continues to adjust to some of the bigger changes that have been made to the format recently, we will start to see larger trends re-emerge. And with that, we can jump into discussing our winners for this month. In Novice 2, our winner was Charlotte Mimic, who was playing Daze, Hexdrinker, and Tropical Island. Daze was the most popular pairing for Hexdrinker this month, and it's easy to see why. 3-card blind is the leanest format that you can possibly have, so most decks aren't carrying around extra mana to pay for something like Daze, making it more often than not an unconditional free counterspell. In Novice 1, our winner was Pup Calamity, who was playing Hexdrinker, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Undiscovered Paradise. On a surface level, it might not be clear which of the two decks we just looked at might be better, but the reality is it's very situational. As a matter of fact, Vex DK in the same pod was playing Daze, Hexdrinker, Tropical Island, so we have a real reference point here that would indicate, at least in this pod, Inquisition of Kozilek pulled a little more weight than Daze did. I think this was driven in part because of a number of oddball decks that we don't usually see, but that tends to be the nature of novice pods. We have new players, and with those new players they often bring new and creative ideas. In Aspirant 3, our winner was Nick Rue, who was playing a deck that may look familiar to you if you've been following my puzzle videos, which was Generous Plunderer, Sandstone Needle, and Stasis. This is an extremely unique deck that uses Generous Plunderer to generate the blue mana you need to hold up Stasis, and Stasis keeps the treasures that you give your opponent tapped, and once you have given your opponent a critical mass of treasures, you can opt to not pay for the Stasis upkeep costs to free your Generous Plunderer from Stasis and attack for lethal damage. Tied with Nick Rue in first for Aspirant 3 was Obsidian K, who was playing Gorman's Talent, Hickory Woodlot, and Sheltered Valley. Once this deck gets Gorman's Talent to level 2, it begins to produce a 3/3 raccoon every turn. This is the first time we've seen Gorman's talent in the main event, so it's exciting to see a brand new deck claim a pod win. In Aspirant 2, our winner was Serve, who was playing Crawling Chorus, Caracas, and Leyline of Singularity. The combination of Caracas and Leyline of Singularity are a format classic, and as much as I like to complain about the quality of Crawling Chorus as a card, this isn't the first time we've seen it claim a pod win, and it might not be the last either. In Aspirant 1, our winner was Yum, who was playing Alpine Moon, Hammerheim, and Heartfire Hero. I've been enjoying seeing this deck because it reminds me of some 3-card blind classics that are maybe a little too powerful for the meta right now, like Chronomaton, but it keeps the power of the deck in check by linking its power to Hammerheim, which limits the number of options that Heartfire Hero can be paired with, and makes it more vulnerable to land destruction than its banned predecessors. In Contender 6, we had a tie between Grob and Your Face 1254, and they were both playing Daze, Hexdrinker, and Tropical Island. This was the only deck this month that we saw claim multiple pod wins, so there's no question it was a strong one. In Contender 5, our winner was Wax Quail, who was playing Cleansing Wildfire, Mishra's Factory, and Mox Ruby. This turned out to be an amazing meta call because the pod contained no basic lands at all. This led to Wax Quail standing head and shoulders above all other players in the pod. In Contender 4, we had a tie between Good Intentions and Monkey Twins 1, who were both playing Mishra's Factory, Mox Jet, and Nezumi Shortfang. Since it was unbanned, Nezumi Shortfang has been a consistently strong performer, and this month was no exception. The flip side of Nezumi Shortfang, Stab Whisker the Odious, pumps out so much damage every turn that it claims a free win against almost any deck that can't deal with it. But we're not done with Contender 4 yet. It turns out this was a 3-way tie. Sandcrab also won this pod using Dwarven Hold, Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, and Stronghold Gambit. Stronghold Gambit is basically poor man's show and tell. If your opponent has no creatures in their hand when you cast this card, it lets you put Emrakul directly onto the battlefield. If your opponent does choose to hold a creature in their hand so that you can't win the Stronghold Gambit minigame, you can always bank up the 15 mana you need to just hardcast Emrakul using Dwarven Hold. In Contender 3, our winner was Skippytoe, who was playing Prairie Dog, and Remote Farm. This deck doesn't have any tricks up its sleeve, it simply has 2 copies of one of the best 2-drops in the format, and in this context that was more than enough to claim the pod win. In Contender 2, our winner was T-Bubble, who was playing Contagion, Dryad Arbor, and Unmask. Compared to the version of this list that you're probably used to seeing, Contagion offers some small advantages over Force of Despair in certain environments. Notably, unlike Force of Despair, Contagion can deal with Unstoppable Slasher. T-Bubble barely edged out Traubin, who was on a very similar deck, which was Dryad Arbor, Force of Despair, and Grief. It wasn't Unstoppable Slasher that made the difference though. T-Bubble claimed the win because Contagion was able to deal with Thalia, and Force of Despair was not. Contagion doesn't have a timing restriction, so T-Bubble was able to use Dryad Arbor to pay for the additional tax that Thalia demands, whereas Traubin was not able to pay for that additional cost because the window of opportunity to cast Force of Despair had already passed by the point they were able to play their Dryad Arbor. In Contender 1, our winner was Soren Markov, who was playing Mana Crypt, Phyrexian Dreadnought, and the Mycosynth Gardens. For those of you who haven't seen this deck list before, it plays Phyrexian Dreadnought, and while Phyrexian Dreadnought's trigger is on the stack, the additional floating mana provided by Mana Crypt is able to be leveraged by the Mycosynth Garden to transform the Mana Crypt into a copy of Phyrexian Dreadnought, allowing you to cheat the card out on the first turn of the game and threaten a turn 3 win. And finally, our winner in Exemplar and new champion was Talons and Tails, who was playing Blast Zone, Keldon Megaliths, and Sunken Citadel. It's exciting to see an interesting deck like this one that is only possible in the 3-card blind format claim a win at the highest level of play. This makes Talons and Tails our new champion with a 1918 ELO rating. And with that, I'd like to congratulate our winners one more time and move on to discussing the cards that will be included in this month's ban vote. The first card we will be including on this list is Hex Drinker, which breaks a precedent that we usually try to adhere to, which is to give cards that were recently voted on a single month of immunity before we vote on them again. The reason we will be voting on Hex Drinker in spite of this is because the conditions have substantially changed from the month prior in regards to the status of the card. I believe one of the reasons that Hex Drinker narrowly avoided a ban in the prior month is because many folks felt that the main driver for Hex Drinker's performance was its powerful combination with Wasteland. This month, in the absence of Wasteland, we saw Hex Drinker's win rate and popularity both go up, indicating that its popularity and strength go a long ways beyond just its ability to leverage Wasteland. That being said, I do think leaving Hex Drinker legal would be a sensible outcome, but doing so has to come with the understanding that it will continue to be one of the most popular cards in the format, so long as it's legal. Next on this list is Daze, which was the fourth most popular card this month and a popular pairing for Hex Drinker. The second most popular one-drop threat this month was Sleep Curse Fairy, and Daze was also its preferred pairing, so the strength of Daze is certainly not limited to just a single one-drop choice. Next up, we will be bundling the two cards Grief and Unmask into a single vote option. Grief and Unmask both support the same deck type, which is to use one of those two options in combination with either Contagion or Force of Despair, along with a free threat like Dryad Arbor or Memnite. This category of deck has been claiming pod wins across many months for a long time. Although its presence in the meta has never been overwhelming, its persistence has been undeniable. It could be time to see this deck take a timeout on the ban list. Next we have Blast Zone, which was a critical card in our overall winning deck this month. The Keldon Megaliths plus Blast Zone deck, or Mega Blast deck, was relatively obscure up until recently. We did see this deck first played back in May of 2024 by Potamaphile, and as of today, the deck still hasn't broken a double-digit number of submissions. That being said, Blast Zone is positioned to be a very powerful card moving forwards, and the deck can be tricky to counter without making yourself vulnerable to many other popular strategies. I, for one, would love to see how the meta shakes out with the card remaining legal, but I have been advised by some of our top players that not including this card on the list could have dire consequences for the meta moving forwards, especially at higher ranks. And the final card on our list is Ajani Nakatl Pariah, which was the most popular of the white 2-drops that is fueling the popularity of Remote Farm. Because Ajani is a single card that puts 2 bodies on the board, it's very resistant to removal, allowing you to run your own removal spell in cards like Soul Partition or Divine Gambit without opening yourself up to being vulnerable to removal. And although Ajani didn't claim any pod wins this month, I think it's worth noting that in Exemplar League, which is our top 25 rated players, Ajani was the second most popular card this month, right behind Remote Farm. And that wraps up the list of cards that we will be voting on this month. Don't forget to cast your vote on the website, which will be linked in the description of this video. And before we wrap up here, I thought I would mention that I've created a second YouTube channel where I will be talking about all things Magic beyond the scope of 3-card blind. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on other aspects of Magic the Gathering, I would really appreciate your support if you checked out the other channel. Thank you again to all of you who participated this month, and I'm looking forward to sharing the results of the ban vote with you very soon. Thanks for watching everyone, and see you soon.